Okay, lahoyu yom tovim b'Yisrael chamisha asar b'av. Today's chamisha asar b'av. It's a happy day in Klal Yisrael, so it should be a wonderful day for us all. We should hear many more b'suras toyos. The Harugei Beitar were eaten l'kfura, and they didn't. Their bodies didn't rot. So Kodesh Baruch should help that all of our captives should come out in good condition as quickly as possible.
Amen.
Okay. Avigdor, I'm recording this Lukovid you special so that you should be able to listen to it, and your reminder to record it is ringing in my ears. Zok the Heilige Gemara. Sholach Rav Huna bar Avin. Rav Huna bar Avin said, Yisrael sholach achsodam me'ovit b'chovim, a Yisrael that purchased a property from a guy, ubo Yisrael lacha v'hichzik ba, ein moitinois miyadoi, you don't take the field away, you don't take the property away from this second person that the Rashbam calls a Rasha because he was kindness. If you notice, it doesn't say anybody else could come and take it. It says if someone else came and took it, you don't take it away, which would indicate that he's not such a big tzaddik for taking it. That we pass on like Shmuel in this prat, and that is that a goy that relinquishes the property once he receives the money, that property is now in limbo. It's like Hefker, and anybody who is Zoiche in it will be Zoiche in it. And therefore, if the person who bought it from the goy doesn't move quickly to make the chazakah, somebody else can make the chazakah and deprive him of this field. But on the other hand, Lagabi the Shailov, when you dig in a property, does it koine the whole property, or does it just koine the area that you dug in? Lagabi that we pass like Rav, that will be koine the whole property. And that's what Rav Nachman Paskin. Rabba, Hanit Lasmili Ishtoili Ukvan Bar Nechemia, Reish Kalusa Mishmei Dishmu. The following three halachas were taught to me by Ukvan Bar Nechemia, who was the Reish Kalusa, in the name of Shmuel. The first one was Dina the Malchusa Dina. Dina the Malchusa Dina, the Rashbam says by Goiz Lokama, Teda the Katli Dikli, the Gashri Gishri, for Avrin Alayu. They go into people's properties and they cut down their trees for wood. They use the wood to build bridges, and we use the bridges. We don't say it's stolen material. Why? Because Dina the Malchus Dina. Now, there's three main shatim in the Rishonim. How does it work? How does Dina the Malchus Dina work? There's one shot of the Rishonim is since the king can go take anything he wants, he's all powerful. Therefore, his halachas are din, which sounds like it's a dictatorial type of situation. It's dealing with reality. He can do whatever he wants. He's the king. Therefore, his dinim hold. That is the shita, I believe, of the Rishbam. But there's a shita that learns that it's more of a communal type of thing. In other words, vibalt, people want law and order. People want a normal system. So they accept from the Malchus certain directives, certain laws, because they also consider them to be just. And then there's a shita that holds that it's more a democratic type of thing. In other words, actually for carrot, there's a shita that holds democracy isn't Dina, it's like a shutfis. We're all doing this together. We're electing people together. We're creating policy as a society that's not even Dina. That's a shutfis. That's we're all accepting it upon ourselves. So again, so far the two shitas we have is one is since the king can do anything he wants, so a might makes right, so to speak. The second shita is that people accept from the king that those rules. But then there's the shita Rashba, which is very interesting. The shita Rashba is that Dina Malchus Dina does not apply to every type of rule. It only applies to national affairs. And there's a very big shaila how to understand the Rashba. But the pashtus is that it might not apply to civil matters. So national affairs, laws that affect the nation, taxation, all these things are to support the country. Those are things where you have halach of din al din. But civil affairs, not. And Rabbi Vadi Yosef was asked the following shaila. There were some frum women who lost their father, and they had brothers. Now the halacha of Yerusha is everything goes to the brothers, and the secular rule in Israel is that the Yerusha split evenly, and they wanted to know from Rabbi Yashiv, are they allowed to go to secular Israeli courts and make a claim on the estate? They should get their fair share. And Rabbi Yashiv writes to Tshuva that it's a horrible thing. He says it's actually even worse than going to a goyish court. But he said even if it was a goyish court, you wouldn't be allowed to, because there you don't say dinah de malchus dina. If you're going to say dinah de malchus dina, even in civil matters, well then the whole Torah will be bottled. The whole Choshen Mishpat will be bottled. Ella, he says, Avada dinah de malchus dina is only legabe affairs that are the needs of the government, the needs of the civilization. But civil matters, you're not allowed to go to Arkois at all. He said, and in Israel it's even worse, because you have these Jewish judges who think that they have a right to paskin. So there's a Chil Hashem, and there's a Messiah, the Oivar Avera in there as well. He says, Chas v'sholem, you're not allowed to go to secular court at all. Okay, Gavaltik. So that's the first halacha, Dino de Malchus Dina. The only thing that we need to point out is, if it's because the king could do anything he wants, like the first shot we said, then it shouldn't really say Dina de Malchus Dina, it should say Dina de Malchus Dina. But that is how we're trying to learn. Varisusa de Parsoi ad memshnim. If there's a oris in Persia, we learned that an oris never has a chazak because he was always there. La'echol peiros. Dr. Rashbam, in Persia, the din of Malchusa was that if you're there for 40 years, an oris is there for 40 years, does have a chazak. Let's have a look at the Rashbam. The Arisa, the Parsoy Abonshnin, Cheskas Parsiim Mem Shonami, the chazak of our person was 40 years. Aide din of Malchusa. The Avagav Loikoni Inish Ela Bishtar, even though you cannot be going only with a star, Miyum Hichsak Ba'akim Mem Shonim. What happens if a goy had a chazak on a property for 40 years? Normally, if you buy a property off a goy, the goy bought it off a yid, even if the goy was there 40 years, doesn't make a difference. The original yid can claim that the goy stole it from him. But in Persia, there was a rule of 40 years of a chazaka. Therefore, if a goy bought a property from a Jew and he was there for 40 years, Uboy Yisrael, the economy menu, Havi Kinyan Gomer would be a good Kinyan. V'lo yuchal Yisrael lacher loymar shalihi shegaz la'ako imeni. A yid will not be able to be ma'ar and say that this was stolen from me. Ya'afagav damrina. Even though we said earlier, Yisrael labo machmaso akum hareyu kakum. If a Yisrael is money, if a Yisrael is on a property and another Yisrael is ma'ar and said you bought this from the goy, but the goy stole it from me, the yid 3 years don't mean anything, because if he bought it from a goy, it's a chazaka shein l'taina, unless he has the original star where the Yisrael sold it to the goy that he bought it from, he would be thrown off the land. In Persia, yesh lechazaka because of the din of Malchus Dina. That's one pshat that the Rashbam says. Inami asal ashminan yafagav de b'shar mekaymis have a chazaka Yisrael b'givul shanim. Maybe it's the opposite. Even though normally a regular yid buying from a yid doesn't have to hold the star more than 3 years, there it's paras ein chazaka the pachas mimem shonim the din of Malchusa hu sham kain. In Persia, you'd have to hold on to the star for 40 years. Now this is interesting. Clearly, this is not like the Rashba who holds it's only on municipal matters or federal matters, but not legabi civil court, because chazak is surely a civil matter. But al koponim, there's others who know another interesting shot. That arisusa de bersoy ad mem shnin means that if you hire an oris, it's a 40-year minimum contract. That's how other people learn. Okay, and it's funny because it's not really 3 things. Because the second thing that we just learned, arisusa de bersoy ad mem shnin, it's because of din al Malchus Dina. So it's not really 3 separate things. The heading is Dina Malchus Dina, and the other 2 halachas, the other 2 rules are just a result of Dina Malchus Dina. And the third thing is Vahani Zaharuri, these very wealthy people who yarshed a lot of money, they were referred to as Zaharuri, and we'll see in the Rashbam soon why. The Zovan Ara Lataska. They went, there was a Jew who couldn't afford to pay his property tax, and because of that, the government seized his property. And the wealthy Jew went and paid off the tax, and he bought, or the government seized the property from this person for not paying tax. And then this rich fellow paid off the property tax or bought the property off of the government who foreclosed on it. Zvinu Zvini, he could keep that property. Let's have a look at the Rashbam. Hani Zaruri, Bali Nachlois, Ba'ashirim, people who own properties, they're wealthy. They collect, they purchase from the revenue department of the king, Sadois Aniyah, the fields of the poor people, that were unable to afford the property tax. The wealthy people pay off the taxes, and they get to hold the property because of the tax. It's not for Hamas. Shekain Dina, the Machusa, that is the halacha of Din, the man, the Yoav Taska, Lechalara, the person who pays the property tax, he will be able to keep the land, like we said earlier. Zavinayu Zavini, Mashakonina Karka, may Abde Amelech, Bishvil Hamas, that they're purchasing the property from the revenue department because of the taxes, Shanoistin that they give, Mecher and Kaim, it's a legit sale. They get to keep it. Why did Dina? Since they have a right to seize the property, it's considered legally seized even in halacha, and therefore when you buy it off them, it's yours fair and square, and therefore what if the original bailim now come up with the money and they want it back and say, give me my property back, Lahani Zaruri will pay you the tax that you laid out. We want our property back. They have no claim whatsoever against these people who bought this property from the government because it's a legal sale, because we recognize Dina, the Malchusa Dina. We don't say that these tax collectors stole the property from the Yid and therefore it's not a good sale. Rather, we say that they seized it is with right, and therefore, when you bought it from them, you bought it fair and square. Zarure al Nachla Shakari Zihara. The command of Perach HaMoikers Abayis, the Amale Zihara, Afilu, Bustani, Upardisi. So we're just trying to show that Zihari means wealthy people. The Hela Klas Amili. So here you have your three items that the Reish Galusa said over to Rabba. And that is, Kamaisa Dina Dina, and Ubarisa de Persoi, that it's 40 years, Hani Darure, but Shetuluyin, Bedin de Mukhusdina, all of these halachas really depend on the rule of Din de Mukhusdina, Haretlas. Okay, so tomorrow we're going to qualify this. The only time we say that when the government seizes a property, it's Din de Mukhusdina, and therefore it's recognized halachically, and it's a proper sale, Bahanamili, Zok to Gemara, Lataska. That's if they seize the property due to overdue property taxes, because it's only property taxes, it's only delinquent property taxes that there's a rule from the Melech that you're allowed to take the property with. Avalakaga, what if it was some other tax, like head tax, that the person was delinquent in? That would not allow them, the Din Muslim does not allow them to take away properties for somebody who's delinquent in his head tax. And therefore, if the tax department seized this property, it would have been an illegal seizure, and therefore Dina de Malchusa Dina does not cover it. And if you bought such a property from the government, in fact, you would have to give it back to the person who it was seized from. My timer, karga akarkav the gavri monach. The liability is on his person, it's not lien to his field. Sometimes the government is overzealous and the employees take things away because they need to collect their taxes, but they're not authorized to. That would be considered an unlawful seizure, and therefore wouldn't be covered by Dina de Machusadina. Let's have a look at the Rishbam inside. Avul Karga, Bishal Kesef Gulgalto Shaloi Paru, Machur Lehem Avdei Melech Karkoisov Shalzeh, that's Loyav Zavina. If they seize the property because of a head tax, the Ein Zedin de Machusa, that is not written in the law books. Ligvois Akarka Bishvil Masaroish. It's only, your property is only subject to seizure or to forfeiture, Kiyam Bishvil Masakarka, only because of property tax. But head tax is a karkav to the gaver monach. Or yitvesu, if they want, they could seize him and put him into jail. Achiyitin me'ilov, until he comes up with the money. Or yivrach meneir, or chase him away, throw him out of the city. You can't live here if you don't pay your tax. Ach milsa gemara come. This the Gemara is adding in. It's not. It wasn't said by the Yosy. The Gemara is telling us that head tax does not subject your land to be seized, and if it was, it's not lawful. Okay, gewaltig. Zog to Gemara of Hunu v'Reda B'Shua Amar afilu sari dekada mishtabdi lakar. When it comes to tax, even head tax, everything you own is meshubit to pay that up. Even if you have a jar of barley in your house, a metaltlin, that's meshubit as well. And of course, your karka would be subject as well. That is dina de malchusa dina. And therefore, if they seized your property because of delinquent head taxes and someone wealthy paid it off and bought it, it would be a fair sale. Now, this is going to be a little bit of a difficulty because is it a machlekes and metzias what the law is? So let's have a look. Let's have a look at the Rashbam. Afilu sari dekada shekvar nitlashu min akarka that they're already cut down from the field. And they're in his jug. The Cholshkin Karka Atzma would be Beshubid, the Loishno Zov in Ara Lataska, or Lakarga, Zvina, Zvini, the Achi Havadin Lamachusa. So there is a big shaila as to exactly what is the machlokes here. It can't be a machlokes in Metzias, but it might be a machlokes in they do seize it sometimes, and sometimes they get away with it. So the question is, if the shaluchim of the Melech take something, even though it's not mamish in the Melech's book, is that also covered by Din Dalmuchus? That's probably what the shaila is. Sari the Kada, Kleimer Kol Matal Mishiesh Leba Oilam. Anything a person owns is Mishubadim Lamelech Bishvil Mas Roisha. Everything you own is subject to seizure by the IRS or by the CRA. Everything that he owns is Mishubit to the king. Anything you buy from the revenue department, no matter how they took it, no matter for what reason they took it, it's a fair sale and you could buy it. There are those who bring a raya from here to a very interesting shaila. When we build Erevin, so we need everybody that's included in the Erev to want that Erev. But sometimes there are non-shomer Torah mitzvahs in an area that's covered by the Erev. And sometimes there's even non-Yidden that are covered by the Erev. So what do? We go to the authority of the city. In this case, in Toronto, they went to the mayor of the city and they bought permission to use this space as an Erev, to make an Erev there, so they get authority from the city. We once got, when we were learning Maseches Erevin, we actually got a copy of that letter from the city that authorized the building of the Erev. The question is, what authority does a mayor have to be able to be Mishabat Evu's Karka, to agree to the whole property in the city to be able to be used for an Erev? So it's based on this Gemara. Since it's in extreme cases, when someone doesn't pay his property tax, technically the city can seize it. Therefore, that gives him the right to be able to authorize. That means all the lands are meshubit to the melech, to the ruler, and therefore it gives the mayor authorization to be mater and erev. And this is negated to their abundance, not their rises, but it's a very serious halacha that's negated to allow Erevin on Shabbos. It's all based on fact that should someone not pay their taxes, the city might be able to take away his property. Zok to Gemara weiter. Rav Huna ber Yeshua Amar Filu Sari Dekada Mishtav Lekar. Amar Rav Ashi Amar li Huna bar Nosson. Kashi ba'amem. Rav Ashi said over that Huna bar Nosson said that Amem had a real problem with Rav Huna or Rabbi Yeshua's halacha that everything that a person owns is mishubed to the king. Why? Because im kain batalta Yerushas b'noi avachar. There'll be no such thing anymore as pishnai. If you're going to paskin that everything that a person owns is mishubed to the king, then what you're really doing is you're being mevatel the whole concept that a bechor gets pishnai. Why is that? The havali royal, because everything you have is royal. You know why? Because you're in the second position. Any estate, if there's any tax owed, that is, if there's any tax owed on the estate, nothing in the estate belongs to the people in the estate, the recipients of the beneficiaries of the estate. It all belongs to the king. Now, if eventually you get it, once taxes are paid off, that's called royal. It was not in the estate live when the person died. It was owed to, but therefore there should be no din of pishnayim. So the first question that jumps out at you is, what are you talking about? What if the father owes money? Every time someone owes money, so his property is meshubah to a balchoyev, or if the father is married and his property is meshubah to the ksubas isha, so there's no din pishnayim. Uvosab is the king. So Tosfos and the Rishbam answered this very beautifully. Let's just take a quick peek in the top Tosfos. In Kain Baltalta Yushas B'noi, Zok Tosfos, there's a huge difference between a regular shibud and the shibud that the king has. The Bishlami Kol Adam Sheyeshel of Ksubas Isha B'choyev, that shibud doesn't make it royal. Even though every property, everything that he has is meshubed to pay off that loan, that wouldn't be mavato the din pishnayim. That wouldn't be lacking in the kol asher yimotze loy. Mishum the milva v'isha mechusher gevayna. It doesn't belong to these people. It's meshubed. But you know how much red tape they have to go through to collect on the shibud. They need Bezdin to authorize the whole, to begin the process of seizure, and then the field has to be announced and advertised. In Shuma, it has to be appraised. It's a whole process, but it's very much still in the control of the estate. But when you're talking about the king, if you owe $100, the IRS can come and seize a property worth $100,000. They can grab anything they want. They don't need to go through process. They grab and ask questions later. So that really makes your kaka more in the control and the possession of the melech than it is in your own possession. We consider the melech's seizure or the melech's control on your property so strong that he's more of a muchzik than you are. And therefore, anytime there's any money owed to the government in an estate, the assets in the estate isn't even called the chalashiyah matzalot. It's only called something that might end up coming back to the estate once all the debts are cleared. And therefore, there will be no din of the Bechor taking Pishnayim. Amarlei, so he asked him back. So Rabbah must have asked him back, or I'm sorry, maybe Rav Huna asked him back. Rav Yeshua asked him back. I don't understand. Why are you asking b'dafka on me that I say that everything you owe to government, no matter what type of tax, allows them to take your property, even if you don't hold like me, even if you hold that they could only seize property legally if I owe them property tax, you still have the same problem. Because anybody who owes property tax, that land, it won't be considered muhsik, it'll be considered royal. And once again, you have a problem that a Bechor will not take pishnai. Why don't you consider it shver if it's only taska? Because it's speaking the Yov Tasko Miss. You know where there will be property tax? There will be property tax. So you know where there will be the halacha of pishnayim of a Bechor because the government doesn't have control of your property? It's speaking where before the person died, he paid off his taxes for the year. So his properties upon his death were free and clear. There you're going to agree to me that it is considered muhsik and there is pishnai. Well, Ibazai, even though I say any tax allows them to seize your property, achanami the yav kagomis. You know where there's a case of pishnayim, where before a person died, he was fully current in all of his taxes. And there it would be muhsik, it wouldn't be rayu, and therefore it would be b'chalash yimatzaloi, and there would be a din of pishnayim. Amar Rashi, Amar Lihuna bar Nosson, she'iltinu l'sifri de Rava. I asked the soifrim of Rava, they used to write the shtoris on behalf of Rava's best. But Amrli, and they told me, the that anything that the revenue department seizes is considered dina da malchusa dina, and if a wealthy person buys those assets off of the revenue department, it's a proper sale. But velohi, it's absolutely not true. So Rabbi Ashi said, it's not true, this halacha, even though all the Soifrim said that that's the halacha, I'm telling you that is not the halacha. So why did they wrongfully say the halacha? Why did they say that the halacha is so that anything that the revenue department seizes is considered illegal if it's not true? Why do they say it? Because they themselves were people who purchased from the revenue department, and they were negebado. So therefore, if these Soifrim would believe that they didn't buy it, they would lose the things that they bought. They wanted to keep the properties that they bought off the revenue department. So that's why they said that the halacha is that if the revenue department seizes something, no matter what tax was due, it would be considered din l'mechusa. But in fact, that's not true. It's only if a revenue department seized property due to delinquent property taxes that would be legit. Anything else is not legit. And if you bought property off the revenue department and they only seized it unlawfully for a different type of tax other than property, you would have to give it back to the original owner. Vamar Rabashi, Pardachas. Pardachas is a good for nothing, a bum. That's the only way I can describe a Pardachas, is a good for nothing bum. Let's have a look at how the Rashbam describes what a Pardachas is. Zok to Rashbam, Hapardachas.
That's not a good nickname for Revenue Canada.
Adam Botel Mimalocha, someone who doesn't have a job, Umi Limud, and he doesn't learn, Umi Derech Eretz. I'm not sure what Derech Eretz means. If he's not working and he's not learning, Derech Eretz means he doesn't do anything, he doesn't contribute. He's a bum. He's a good for nothing bum. When we lived in Elderberry, we had many very wealthy neighbors. So there was a meshulach who once knocked on one of our neighbors' doors, and the lady answers, and there was a meshulach coming to collect. So she asked him, he said it's money, it's a big family, whatever it was. So she asked him, "Are you in koil? Are you learning full time?" He says, "No." She said, "Do you have a job?" "No." So she said, "Get a job," and she slapped the door in his face. So it was a pardachas who knocked on her door. He's bottom mimalacha. He's bottom for limud. He's bottom derech eretz. He's a bum. He's not contributing to the world at all. He's literally good for nothing, a bum. So the halacha is, what about such a guy? So he has no money to pay taxes. So nevertheless, he has to pay taxes. He has to contribute to the taxes. Now, the way taxes used to be collected was each neighborhood, each city was assessed by the malchus, that this is how much revenue it has to bring in. This city needs to bring in $10 million. And then the tax collectors would figure out how much of that $10 million would each family, would each person be responsible for. So this fellow would also have to pay his fair share. He doesn't have money. Well, he's a good for nothing. You better come up with the money. That's only if what happened was the tax collectors came to this good for nothing bum. So you must give us $10,000. And they were roughing him up. And the do-gooders of the city came and told the tax department, let him off. By them saying let him off, that automatically makes it that the city has to kick in more money to make up for the shortfall because he didn't give. There, they could say, we came and saved you. We came and saved you. They shouldn't rough you up, but you still have to pay us back. So that's where this halacha applies. Rabbi says if the city comes to his aid and tells the tax department, give him a break, then they're going to have to pay extra because of that, and they can ask him to give that back to them. That's the Atzilte Masa, the city safety. On Disky, what if the tax department overlooked him? Either they didn't think he was worth collecting from, or they didn't notice him. Then he owes them nothing because they didn't rescue him. He got lucky. If you got lucky and the tax department didn't want from you, the other people in the city don't have a right to come after you. Saturday Shmai. We'll say he's a lucky guy. He got off. Let's see what it says in the Rashbam. Alvalam Diski, Mimunin Shal Melach, Haragilan Ligbois, Michal Bayis Ubayis, Mikol Ish Veish, Achiala Hacheshbon Lamasa Kotsu, the tax collectors, who they collect from everybody until they reach the quota that the king said they need to collect from this city. And Vishakhulosa, they forgot to collect from him. Did it ever happen to anybody that the IRS forgot to take their taxes? They didn't even want to bother asking him. Bishvil shehu adam bottle. He's a bum on the street. They figured he didn't have money. And therefore they imposed any shortfall on the rest of the city. Even though everybody else absorbed the shortfall because he didn't give what he should have, Potter, he's still Potter. You know why? The Siyata de Shmai, he got lucky. He got lucky. You can't force him to pay you back. Amr Abbasim Hametzar. Metzar is a boundary. We said a boundary normally means where the edges of the field are either in a ditch, so the ditch is the boundary, or it's in a hill. That shows a demarcation between two properties. And via chatzov. Chatzov is a fascinating plant. Rashbam tells us it's a plant that grows straight up above the surface of the earth and straight down below the surface of the earth. And Yeshua said, what a great plant. It's a plant he used to show the demarcation between anybody's properties. When he split up the nachlois, which belongs to which family, he planted chatzov bushes, trees, plants along the border because they go straight up and they go straight down. And he sort of told them, learn from the chatzov. The chatzov does not infringe or encroach anywhere other than right below it. Kolshkin, you as people shouldn't encroach on other people's properties. So So we know what this means because we just discussed it. If you have two properties, A and B, they both belong to one ger, shemes, but there is a barrier in between the two properties of chatzov plants. The halacha is, I think it's called a sea curl or a sea something is what it's called. The halacha is, it's considered a break, and if you made a chazaka in one field, you're not cutting the other field. It's not one big field. So it's mafzik menich seger, aval inyan peya v'tumah roy, but it's not mafzik inyan peya v'tumah. What does it mean, peya v'tumah? So peya is very simple. You have to leave over the edge of each field. You're not allowed to cut it. However, what if you have a big field that has a border in it of chatzov? Is that one field, and therefore you could be Yosy peya with just leaving over one edge, or is it two fields and you have to leave over two edges? So the halacha is, Rabbi Asi told us in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, le'inyan peya loy, it's not considered a barrier. Leaving over peya in one area of this entire property will be enough. And legabi tuma, we will shortly see what that means. Ravin argued with Rabbi Asi in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, and he said that it would be a barrier for peya and tumah. So peya mahi. What is the case of peya? It's not to be learned. The following barriers separate two fields that got a peya and mandates that the owner give a separate peya for each of the two fields. Hanachal. A nachal is a riverbed, a dry riverbed. Bashalulis is puddling of water that gather, creates a barrier. V'derech harabim, v'derech hayochid. If it's a big street, a public street, or if it's a small street, a private alley. Ushvil harabim, or if it's merely a path that the rabbim use. Ushvil hayochid, or if it's a path that the yochid uses. Hakavua bein b'yimoy secham bein b'yimoy secham. It does have to be used in all 4 seasons. If it's a seasonal path, that's not called a barrier. So there's actually machlokes Rishbam here and Tosfos. Rishbam asks, I don't understand. If derech harabim, if derech hayochid is a good barrier, for sure derech harabim is. So the Rishbam learns this whole brayso is loizu apsu. It's building the chiddush. Derech harabim is more mistaber that it should be a barrier. Derech hayochid, you might say it's not. Kamash one that it is. Shvil is even smaller. But Tosfos actually goes through a whole stickle. It's a pretty lengthy Tosfos. How each one is a chiddush in and of itself. So that is the case of Peah. Tumah mahi. What is the case of Tumah where there's a separation that makes it into a separate field? Lamai nafkamina. It's not be learned. Hanichnas lebika b'yemoshak geshamim. If someone walks into a big valley in the yemoshak geshamim, v'tumah b'sada ploinus, and one of the fields in this large area with many fields has a mace buried there. Omar, and the person said, I know I was in the bika, but I don't know if I touched the mace. I don't know if I was over the mace. So I don't know if I'm tummy or not. So there was a machlokes. Rabbi Eliezer holds it's tar. This subject tummy is tar. Now, in the winter, we know properties, fields, bikas are considered reshus hayochids. Why are they considered reshus hayochids? Because in the winters, when everything's planted, and nobody wants people traipsing through their fields, then their crops are growing, so it's considered reshus hayochid. And we know there's a rule: safek tumah reshus hayochid, sveikai tamei. So the Chachamim say this is a safek tumah. It's a safek as to whether or not you came in contact with the tumah. It's reshus hayochid, and therefore it's going to be tam. But Rabbi Eliezer says it's tar. We need to know why. There's actually 3 separate reasons in the Rishonim why Rabbi Eliezer would argue and say it's tar, which we'll get to in a minute. Let me just read the words of the Gemara. Rabbi Eliezer Eimer, safek bia tar. If it's a safek, if you even came into the field that had the tumah, that's going to be tar. Safek magatuma tamei. So that we say safek tumah b'shus hayochid tzveikei tamei, that's a safek if you touched it, not if you came in. Now this is a little bit interesting because it's not multiple shilas. It's really all one big shilah. Did you touch the tumah or didn't you touch the tumah? Which is how the Chachamim look at it, and therefore they hold you tamei. Rabbi Eliezer might look at it like safek, did I come into this property with the tumah? And even if I came into the property, did I touch it? It might be a sfek. So there's 3 pshatim in the Rishonim to understand Rabbi Eliezer. So let's have a quick look in Tosfos. We won't learn every word of Tosfos. We'll just skim through it. So the Rashbam was the first pshat that Tosfos quotes. The Peligi de Rabbi Eliezer chashuv svek. The machlokes is the Rabbanan hold it's one safek. Did you touch the tumah? Didn't you? And we know svekei tamei. But Rabbi Eliezer holds no. You break it down. You break it down. Did you even enter the field? And even if you entered the field that had the tumah in it, did you touch the tumah? So therefore, the svek, and he holds even though safek tamei, which is a yachid, svekei tamei, but a sveka, you don't say that. That's the first shot. For Rashi Pirish, Beperek Basra Davodah Zarah, Rashi had a different shot. That the Ari Bisad the Malaya Tumah. So there's only one safek over here. Because if you came into this field, you for sure became tamei. It's not like the Rashbam learns that even if you came into the field, maybe you didn't touch the tumah. No, if you came into the field that had a tumah in it, you for sure became tamei. So there's no sveka here. So then what is Rabbi Eliezer svara to be mitahir? Well, please, Rabbi Eliezer savar ablagav the leka elachada sveka. Even though there's only one safek, even the leka safek maga. The safek isn't whether or not I touched the tumah. The safek is whether or not I came into this field. And the safek bia tahar. Why is that? Ba'adu the really safek tumah, you have a chazaka. Me'ikar adin, without the special gzeres akasa by soita, that safek tumah b'shus hayachad tzvekei tamei, you would paskin that it's tar. You have a cheskes taira. There's a gzeres akasa that a safek tumah is tamei. Well, that's only a safek tumah. Safek bia, If it's a suffix, if you even came into that area, the Torah's dictate, the Torah's chiddush of a suffix tumah b'shus yachid tzvekei tomei does not apply there. That was the second shot, and the third shot is the pshat of the Rabbeinu Tam, which is all the way towards the bottom of the Tosfos. For Rabbeinu Tam afars the pligi. This is the machlokes. The Rabbanan metamu afilu bekama tzveikos. The Rabbanan hold that it is a tzvek tzveika. Everybody agrees it's a tzvek tzveika, but they hold that even a tzvek tzveika by Safek Tumah b'shus yachid tzvekei tomei. Why? Because like we said earlier, min hadin, anyway, you should have the cheskes tayra. But there's a chiddush by Soita that teaches us Safek Tumah b'shus yachid tzvekei tomei, meaning it's we pass it like a Bava. So what's the difference if it's one Safek or if it's 10 tzvekes? Every Safek is ruled upon if it's a Safek Tumah as Vadei Tomei. And therefore, even though it's a Svek Sveka, it's going to be Tomei. While Rebbe Elazar holds no. Dafka, one Safek is the Chiddush HaTorah, that by Safek Tumah it'll be Tomei, but not by a Svek Sveka. So there's the three different reasons why Rebbe Eliezer would hold that it's Torah. Aval the Shabbos. So this barrier that we're discussing, we know if it's for sure a barrier, Lagabi being koine nichseger. We have a shaila what Rabbi Yochanan felt about whether it's a barrier Lagabi peah and whether or not it's a barrier Lagabi tumah, as we just learned. So the barrier, I'm sorry, I didn't even mention how the barrier is relevant. The barrier is relevant only according to Rabbi Eliezer. According to Rabbi Eliezer, that there's multiple fields and you don't even know if it came into this field. What if there's one big field that there's no barrier? So that's one big field. So it's not a suffix. It's only relevant if you came into fields that were separated by barriers. And the chatzab would be a barrier for tumah, meaning that would make it into a separate field. Therefore, according to Rabbi Eliezer, you have this extra heter that you won't become tamei misa. And Rav Amar afilu le'inyan Shabbos. It's even a barrier le'inyan Shabbos. How is it relevant to le'inyan Shabbos? Very, very simple. The halacha is if you carry food from Rishus HaYachid to Rishus HaRabim, that's an Isur D'Oraisa of Hoitzah. Well, what if you had two Rishus HaRabim that were separated by a Chatzav, or you had one Rishus HaRabim and you had two Rishus HaYachid that were separated by a Chatzav, and you brought a half a groigris, the minimum shear that you have to carry, that you have to be moichi for an Isur D'Oraisa, is the shear of a groigris, of a big pig. So what happens if you took a half a groigris out into one Rishus HaRabim, and then afterwards you took another half a groigris out into the other side of the Rishus HaRabim, on the other side of this Meitzah? Or if you took a half a groigris to Rishus HaRabim from this Rishus HaYachid, and then you took another half a groigris out to Rishus HaRabim from the other Rishus HaYachid, and there was this barrier between them, would it be considered two different Eitzos, and therefore you're potter, because in either case you didn't have a full groigris, or could you combine them? The Tanya, Hoitzi Chatzi groigris Rishus HaRabim, Benicha, and you put it down. The Chazav Hoitzi Chatzi groigris, Acheres, and then you took it another groigris. The Helamachas, if you did it all, not knowing that it was Shabbos, Chayiv, we combine these two into one big Haitzah of a groigris, and you're Chayiv a carbon chatas for being over Haitzah on Shabbos B'Shoigim. But B'Shnei Alamis, if first you took out one Chatzi groigris, and then you realized it was Shabbos, and we were aware, so that cuts off that malacha, it was only half a groigris, there's no Chiv chatas. And then you forgot again, and you took out another half a groigris, that's going to be potter, because the whole shear of Eitzah wasn't done in one forgetting. But to be Yosy, it's not enough that it should be Behelam Echad to be Mechayiv Yuachatos. It has to be B'Rishus Achas. It also has to be the same Rishus HaYachid and the same Rishus HaRabim. But there it will be Chayiv. But B'Shtei Rishuyos, if in one half a groigris you took it to one Rishus HaRabim, and in one half a groigris you took it to the other Rishus HaRabim, or you took it from one, in one case you took it from one Rishus HaYachid, in the other case you took it from another Rishus HaYachid, potter, it will be potter. Why will it be potter? Because this Chatzav created a barrier which made two separate Rishus HaYachids or two separate Rishus HaRabims, and therefore there would be no Chiyav Chatos for this Eitzah. So here's where it's relevant how a Chatzav, how these barriers could also be a barrier for Indian Shabbos. Okay, Baruch Hashem, we were zeicha to finish Daf Hey, and Be'ez Hashem, tomorrow we're going to learn with a new Frischkeit, because we're going to learn Daf Vav, which is new. It says every day you should feel when you learn Torah, it's like it's new. Tomorrow it's mamish going to be new because it's Daf Nun Vav. Everyone should have a wonderful day.
Correct. Yosy. Yosy.
Yes.
So I heard a joke from my friend Baruch Jacobson that maybe you could tie into the Gemara in old Russia. It came out that the government decided that anybody who has 3 beitzim, they're going to cut one off. That's what they heard. Ooh, wow, this is a serious issue. So they see this guy running. He goes, "Who likes to?" He goes, "You don't have to worry about it." He goes, "I heard Ershman, Schneidman, Nuchdem, Zultman." Now, the first thing is they do that they seize the assets and then Zultman, right?
Very good.
Anyway,
Okay.
shkoyach, thank you.
Have a good day.